So I invited the young dancers, some of which I'd known for a long time. Two of them, one male, one female, described themselves as non-binary. But they had auditioned for sex-based roles. It's Romeo and Juliet, it's based on Shakespeare. Those are men and women. It did literally kick off. And I got shouted at that I was a TERF. And I was really angry back. I was like, this ideology is dangerous. It's a con. Oh my goodness. So that caused such shock and harm that I think what really killed it was I said, and that was the most offensive thing I said. It started to feel like blackmail. You don't want to be like JK Rowling. You don't want to be the witch. I broke a little bit. It broke my brain. It was like this impending, utter doom. It was life-threateningly bad. And my husband sat me down and just said, "You're not mad. They've made you feel mad, but they're mad." And I started to think about an exit plan because I was like, they're trying to kill Rosie Kay. My husband found me on the living room floor.
Did it nearly get violent? Were people getting very animated?
There were a couple of young male dancers that got very animated. Yeah. And the non-binaries got very moody. And then I mean, even at some point.
Take me back to a dinner party that you had that was a little bit controversial. What happened?
See, I've had a lot of dinner parties. I don't know why this one stands out.
You've had one with me, one or two.
Yeah, that was fun. That was nice. That was in Lisbon. Oh gosh. So it was 3 years ago. So it's quite a while ago now. I was making a production of Romeo and Juliet. It was really difficult. I was trying to still make work to pay people, to pay dancers during COVID when the rest of the arts world completely shut down and seemed to be really happy to shut down and get furlough and not do anything. And I thought that was terrible because most of the workforce of the arts is freelance. So, I thought I was trying to do a good thing, making a show. Hey. And it had been delayed a couple of times because of COVID. And we had some really stringent regulations. We weren't allowed to eat lunch together. We weren't allowed to go out together. And we weren't even allowed to touch more than 15 minutes in any 3 hours of a day. So that's 45 minutes when you're trying to make Romeo and Juliet. And if you know anything about dance, then it's a lot of touching and partner work and lifting and sweating. And so we all felt very disconnected. And I'm not used to that. Like a lot of my job, the way I make work is to create this kind of environment where we're all invested in the story and the narrative. Like we're all giving every bit of our imagination and every bit of our experience and telling all our stories. And it was all based in contemporary Birmingham and around gangs and issues with police, gangs, misogyny and violence. So I invited the young dancers, some of which I'd known for a long time, like since they were young, back to my house. And I probably should point out that two of them, one male, one female, described themselves as non-binary. But they had auditioned for sex-based roles. It's Romeo and Juliet, it's based on Shakespeare. Those are men and women. And it was late in the night. My husband had tried to kick everybody out at midnight. And they'd refused. And then they'd sort of set two to my wine collection as well. But it was fine. It was quite lovely. It was all kind of how amazing we all are. It was like it felt normal. And no, you're amazing. No, you're amazing. What's your next show? Well, funny you should ask. I'm doing Orlando. And I'd already started to see that there were problems with my management because they'd written an audition notice that I just had to put sort of red lines through and say, I'm not writing that this is about gender euphoria. What are you talking about? No. And I don't know. So Virginia Woolf's Orlando, the hero starts male and halfway through the novel transforms to being female. And that's not the most fantastical thing about the novel. The most fantastical thing is that Orlando lives through 400 years of British history and Virginia Woolf changes style every 100 years. And so it's like a tour de force. Anyway, that's what kicked off an argument about whether that.
They wanted it to be about gender euphoria.
Well, the dancers wanted me. First of all, said, "Well, that has to be played by a trans person," and I was like, "Well, actually, let's think that through. So that's a man who thinks he's a woman playing a man that transforms into a woman, or it's a woman who thinks she's a man who transforms into it. But then if she thinks she's a man but she transforms into a woman, isn't that double dysphoria?"
Bloody hell.
So I said, I don't know. It could be anyone. It's just got to be somebody who's like extraordinarily talented and a great actor or actress and a great dancer. Anyway, that's what it did literally kick off. And I got shouted at that I was a TERF. And I was really angry back. I was really angry, actually. And I was kind of like, you guys are not looking at the sincere, dangerous threats to what this ideology means for the rights of women in vulnerable places like prisons, hospitals, single-sex spaces, sports. I was just... I knew my stuff. I knew what was going on. And also I was like, this ideology is dangerous. This is not coming up. This is not a civil rights movement. This is coming from the top down, not the bottom up. And you guys are being, I hate to use the word gaslit, but you are being conned. It's a con. Oh my goodness. So that caused such shock and harm that people were very offended and left.
When you said it literally kicked off, did it nearly get violent? Were people getting very animated?
There were a couple of young male dancers that got very animated. Yeah. And the non-binaries got very moody. And then I mean, even at some point, I brought down like blankets. I made herbal tea. I then calm everyone down. I then described how I'd nearly sort of died in childbirth and how that was quite a uniquely female experience. Much as I love my husband, that didn't happen to him, although he was very worried. He did not. I mean, I had an emergency C-section, so I still don't know how babies get out. But this was like seen as offensive, and I was like, oh my God. But I think what really killed it was I said, if you just look down and you'll know if you have a penis or vagina. And that was the most offensive thing I said.
This was a dinner, and I quote, that you organised to relax and cheer everyone up.
That is a normal Rosie Kay dinner. Yeah.
Yes.
Come round to my house anytime.
It seems like it. So I suppose the devil's advocate here is a lot of us believe that the trans ideology is maybe some sort of mental illness. If you had people come for dinner who were working for you, who had maybe anorexia or different, and you were saying, "Oh, come on, you're not this thing," maybe that wouldn't be the best way to do it. Do you think is there an argument for that?
No, I'll accept that. I'll accept that. I think I'm coming from a different age where, like, being with like the dance world and the theatre world has always been like incredibly open. It's been relaxed. It's like people enjoy a bit of an argument. Also, I was always really honoured and enjoyed it when my bosses or my choreographers or whatever, that when they became my friends. And part of that is disagreeing with each other and sort of showing that you have your own mind in your own way. I guess, I got a bit of a generation culture shock when that was the thing that was seen as like really bad behaviour on my part. And I'm willing to accept that perhaps I could have handled that better, but at 1 o'clock in the morning, possibly not. I think my husband had the right idea. They just should have left at midnight, like pumpkins.
But the thing is, it's been how long since?
It's 3 years.
Right. There would have been another moment where this came up, wouldn't there?
I think looking back, I'd never shut up about this. I never had a point where I was kind of like, oh, I better be like silent. I kind of had made my name, made my reputation, and earned my livelihood by being a woman who asked questions and being brave despite, feeling terrified. So, I've joined an infantry battalion. I've made a show about war and men and war that's toured the world for 14 years. I felt like I've worked at the School of Anthropology in Oxford. I felt like, and the professor there said that Rosie's, incredibly brave, the subject matter she looks at. I felt like that was sort of part of my raison d'etre, I suppose, and that I'd earned my place to say things, especially in the arts, that I thought were really, really important. And so this great big phenomenon, and it's not just the trans ideology, there's lots and lots of things around it that we can talk about later, maybe, about the kind of threat to the arts and the threat to society. I saw that coming, and I kind of was very worried, and I kind of wanted to call the warning out on it early.
You asked them, I believe, to define non-binary. Did they respond? Is there a response?
So as far as I understand, the sense is that you don't identify with any sexed sense of yourself, which can be both physical and, I would say, reverts to regressive stereotypes.
Yeah.
So male behaviour or female behaviour, male dress or female dress, and my take as someone who grew up in the 90s, and with Culture Club and Marilyn and all these like amazing, and even Duran or Adam and the Ant, and women, like androgynous women, I've certainly at times felt androgynous, or I've kind of thought, well, what would I do if I was a man or woman? And I'm kind of very open to that sense, but I don't think you should be defined. But we have bodies. That's my point. We actually have bodies, and those bodies lead to sort of asymmetric demands on ourselves. So women, like I said, with the baby, we are the reproductive we take a lot of the reproductive strain, I suppose would be a word.
Yeah, I think so. That's the romantic way of saying it.
Yeah, there are different things happen to bodies in different ways, and male bodies and female bodies are different, and they're different on a cellular level, and they're different on a reproductive level, and they are different on a societal level. But I think of those things as being stereotypes.
Would it be fair to say that, yes, men and women are totally different biologically? There's hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary biology to separate us in certain ways, but most of us want to have some sort of society where, on an individual level, a woman can do any of the things that are stereotypically associated with a man and vice versa, and that is now being skewed by this idea of non-binary, which suggests that the rest of us aren't trying to do that. That's what frustrates. Do you know what I mean? That's what frustrates me.
This video is brought to you by Manscaped.com, the global men's lifestyle brand revolutionizing the landscape of men's grooming. They're at the forefront, providing top-notch quality and value with their latest grooming and hygiene bundle, the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, featuring the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra Electric Trimmer. It has a dual skin-safe blade system with an upgraded trimmer blade and a foil blade for a smooth, skin-close finish. You start with the trimmer blade and easily switch to the foil for that unbeatable smoothness. It's like getting two trimmers in one. It has LED lights for those hard-to-reach areas, a dual temperature feature, USB-C charging, and it's fully waterproof. Don't forget the Weed Whacker 2.0 for nose and ear hair, plus crop soother and freshener and all of these kinds of things that will help for all-day freshness. You even get 2 free gifts, the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 dock. Join the 11 million men worldwide who have put their confidence in Manscaped for grooming and hygiene. Head to manscaped.com/Andrew Gold and get the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra today when you use my promo code Andrew Gold. You'll get 20% off plus free international shipping and 2 free gifts. That's 20% off plus free shipping and 2 free gifts with promo code Andrew Gold at manscaped.com/Andrew Gold. Trust me when I say this, fellas, your balls will thank you.
There's a funny meme, isn't it? I'm sure it's been said many times on podcasts, but it's like in 1950s ideas, who does the dishes? It's the woman. The sort of equality idea, anyone can do the dishes. Now it's whoever does the dishes, male or female, is a woman.
Yeah. Dishes is like synonym for woman.
Exactly. So that I mean, I think this whole debate actually, in lots of ways, has been really, really interesting, and it's really made me re-examine things. So, for example, I know as a dancer, I absolutely don't have as much upper body strength as a man. I don't, and I can't. No matter how much I weight lift, my structure is very different because my hips are wide and my pelvis is much wider for childbirth, and thus the problem with our knees is we have a much sort of like greater angle, so we get a lot more knee injuries and ankle injuries than men. And with my experience of working with the army, I think back in like 2008, when I was embedded with them, I was really stupid, first of all, because I thought there'd be like lots of women there because I thought it was 10% in the army, but I didn't realize that I joined an infantry battalion, which was all male at the time. So there was definitely a sense of like, I'm the only woman, I better sort of fight for all womankind. And when you're wearing like 70-pound Bergen, big rucksack, you've got like a helmet on, body armor, the weight on you is immense, and it damages men's lower backs, hips, pelvis, and all the rest of it. But it particularly damages women. And the more I sort of think about sort of the extremes of male and female behaviour, I'm not sure we're all best equipped to be equal in both parts. And I think I would have found that sexist 10 years ago.
That's a change in feminism or in the mainstream. I mean, Julie Bindel said the same thing, that she was fighting for so long for this idea that men and women are exactly the same, until she saw where some ideologues are going to take that idea. And the reality is we have to admit there are differences. So after this dinner, it's worth reminding those who are not familiar with the dance world, you are a big figure, a big name in the dance world. You choreographed the Commonwealth, the end of the Commonwealth Games, and lots of other dance related things that, that's good. And this was your own company as well.
Yeah, so the background to it was the Arts Council asked for quite a lot of hoops and things if you get regular funding. And I've been trying to get regular funding for about a decade. And one way to make it sort of more attractive to the Arts Council to fund us for like 3 or 4 years was I voluntarily turned the company into a charity. It had been limited by share before, which suited me because I could pull money out when I wanted to, but it was basically sort of not for profit. But as a charity, because we wanted to keep the name, Rosie Kay Dance Company, I had to step down as a director. And I thought, well, okay, I've had a baby. I quite like holiday pay, sick pay, pension. Okay, why not? Very bad idea. Really, really, really bad idea, because I hadn't realised that I'd let go of control. And because I was the guiding force, I had the bravery to do these difficult subject matters. And up until that point, that had worked because it was, if it all went tits up, it was my fault, Once I'd sort of relinquished that bit of control, that responsibility goes to a board. And that board, I think it's lots of people that sit on boards in the arts. It was great 10, 20 years ago. You'd get like a nice wine and a nice theatre and a premiere. It's not nice at the moment. It's difficult. And this whole thing around risk and reputation is absolutely massive, not just for the company or the arts, but for those individual trustees as well. And I think they behave very, very poorly. I really would throw the book at them. They were misguided, they were ill-educated, and I think to a certain degree captured. I hadn't realised that my chair had had a training session by Gendered Intelligence, which is one of these organisations that really promotes trans in children, create the gingerbread man and all the rest of it, and all the pronoun policing. So I realised, so basically I went to work on Monday, I felt the hostility. I think I probably could have just ridden through it and just ignored it, but I asked my chair to step in, which was a bad mistake, because she immediately sided with the dancers, and it was very much from the beginning, you're in big trouble. Yes. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. This is actually a very serious issue. My views are normal. Maya just won her Warriads, Worthy of Respect in a Democratic Republic. These are protected views. Didn't know any of that. And so went through one investigation. I also, to be honest, I broke a little bit. It broke my brain.
What does that feel like? What was, let's say, the moment? Maybe was it a message you received? Was it something you got that just hit you?
First of all, it was like this impending, utter doom, like total dark doom. I told my husband, this is very, very, very bad. And I mean, I would say it was life-threateningly bad. It was really bad. But fortunately, I had a very good GP, and my husband sat me down and just said, "You're not mad. They've made you feel mad, but they're mad. You're not mad." And I'm so glad he said that. I hung on to that, but I did have to go and see a psychiatrist. I was that worried about me, but everyone was that worried about me. And the psychiatrist, after 2 hours, it was great. I had a lovely time. I was like, I imagine dancers in my head. I'm mad, I'm clearly mad. And at the end, she said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just stressed. You're very, very stressed.
Yeah.
You've got a high pressure job. Because I knew it could be public, and it started to feel as it went on, it started to feel like blackmail. It started to feel like we were holding this over you. You don't want to be like JK Rowling. You don't want to be the witch. We're holding this. So there was instructions that I had to re-educate myself. And I disagreed with it profoundly, but I could see, here's your funding, here's your name, here's your reputation, or here's your integrity, and here's what's right. And it was really, as it went on, it became clearer to me what I had to do.
Did they actually mention JK Rowling?
I don't know. Not in the complaints. I mean, the other thing was my manager, who's executive director of the company, I've since seen in data access subject requests that he pushed for the complaints and then he offered to pay for the complaints.
What does that mean?
So he said, he said, we're aware that this is time consuming and it's hard work. So we'd like to offer you some money and thank you for your loyalty to the company.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, really.
So
yeah.
They wanted to get you out, it seems. The reason I mentioned about...
I don't know if they wanted to get me out. I don't think they were that... Why would you get me out? Because you're all going to lose your jobs.
So struggle session.
I think it was like, let's get her under control. Let's shut her up. She's too dangerous. She's too... let's make sure she behaves.
The reason I asked about J.K. Rowling is because when these things happen to various of us, many people in the audience today, I'm sure have experienced things like this, many people watching this, there is part of your head going, well, J.K. is sort of doing okay, and a lot of these people are doing okay, and part of you is almost excited. There's like a new clan of people you can speak to about this maybe, but the overwhelming feeling, as you explained, is utter dread. And you are being, again, evolutionary speaking, you're being kicked out into the savannah. It's just this horrible feeling, gut-wrenching. So I'm pleased you've come through that. The next few months, eventually, what happened next?
The first investigation, I was exonerated. I did do an apology, apologising for, like I said, for making people upset. I'm sorry about that. I'm a dancer. It's like I don't like to see people upset. I'm a bit of a lovey. But then I was told that I had to do re-education, so I was like, okay, wait. And then one of the non-binary dancers walked out just before some shows, but they appealed, and the dread came back, and it was even worse. And by accident, they forwarded me an email, and they were bringing in so-called external lawyers, but it was actually lawyers related to one of my trustees. So there was a conflict of interest going on there. And I was like, hey, hang on a minute. That's not right. They're not independent. And I was none of the dancers, but just I was to undergo an investigation by an HR specialist. So at that point, I brought in my own lawyer, which is Peter Daly, who's like sort of lawyer to the stars now in the gender critical world. But he was brilliant, but we were very, very worried about where this was going. And I was very well aware that we weren't a massively well-funded company, that we must be hemorrhaging money on lawyers now. And they were spending money on their lawyers, and I asked for 500 quid to get opinion, and they said no, not at all. So I had to start going into my own savings to get my own legal advice against my own company, which shares the same address as me.
Oh my God. That's just crazy stress. And
it was insane. You
ended up leaving.
I started to kind of really just try and get sane. I built a little team around me, a very good lawyer, very good mentor. And that just towards the end, I brought in FSU. I asked for some help.
It's Free Speech Union.
Free Speech Union, thank you. And I started to think about an exit plan, because I was like, they're trying to kill Rosie Kay. Rosie Kay needs to survive. So I built a plan. I even then went to the Arts Council, where Denise, who I run Freedom in the Arts, she was still at the Arts Council, quite important at the Arts Council. She came in, she brokered a relationship and tried to help me, but there wasn't much the Arts Council could do. That was the last ditch attempt to save my company. And when they told me they couldn't save it, I collapsed. And I think I felt like everything left my body. My husband found me on the living room floor, and he was like, this is enough. This is enough. God. So that was my wedding anniversary as well. And like lots of my trustees had been at my wedding. It just felt such a betrayal, like a personal multiple stabbings.
It's like Maoist.
Yeah, it was
proper struggle
really
session.
Struggle session, and really like it was so inhumane. It was like there was no like, "Are you all right, Rose?" There was nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody asked like, you know, what. No one was human with me. It was literally like I had been cast out completely. I couldn't believe people could be so cruel to me. I feel embarrassed actually, but I guess I just have to sort of that's what this movement has done to people.
How is it then that the arts, that is something that we associate maybe wrongly with empathy and understanding and creativity and taboo as well? I know that was something that was part of your whole thing, was taboo. We're going to approach taboo. How is it that they seem to be at least the most psychopathic of every people in the arts? What is going on with? And I'm thinking also of celebrities, the big lovies, the big David Tennants of this world. What is going on there?
I suppose there's lots of vulnerabilities. There's lots of vulnerabilities that can be sort of like used and levered. One is your financial vulnerability. Dancers don't have employment contracts, particularly like any artist doesn't have secure contracts. You're only sort of like as good as your last show. Your reputation's kind of everything. So I think also that willingness to please has been weaponized into kind of something that's really nasty, but that kind of wanting to be on the right side of history. If I hear that again, I'll...
It's so mad, isn't it? Because what history and what future?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Maybe you're on the right side of history in 100 years when they've got concentration camps everywhere and they're going, you were right. Or is it 100 years after that when they're all loving it and saying, it's like there's this one goal that we're all reaching.
And you only have to read Solzhenitsyn or Dostoevsky to know that human existence is far, far more complex than just deciding which side you're on. It's a different struggle with the self, with the soul, with meaning, with your behaviour. And that's really what we're here on earth to do. And if the arts aren't looking at that, then there is no purpose to the arts then. So for me, it's such a deep sort of existential question. The other issue with the arts is it's very much being incentivised. So the way the Arts Council funding system, which is something I used to very much defend, where you'd subsidise the really risk-taking artists and the risk-taking work, and you'd find, because you never know what's going to be successful and what's not going to be successful, and then that feeds into a really strong commercial sector. Well, the Arts Council's now sort of putting conditions and terms into funding that has very much encouraged this sort of way of the arts basically telling the unwashed masses what's good and what's right. And so that funding has changed in its instrumentalism from the 80s onwards in such an insidious way that it's almost like the water we're swimming in, and artists are actually just doing what they have to do to get money, but they're actually now really believing in that as well.
When I had my book about to launch, I was at one of these dues that you have at the publisher, and I ended up in a conversation with this editor who was trying to please, I think it was a trans, autistic, body positive, it was like all the things, like everything you can imagine, this person was that. And he was saying all these things about like, oh, we really wanted to do this trans business book, but they found in marketing that there wasn't a market for it, because who's buying a trans business book? Because but I'm going to push it through, and I thought, isn't that's what you're speaking of? I think that idea of like, there isn't a market for it. And this person's in charge of a company that employs loads of people who rely on this person making the right decisions for everyone. And he's going, yeah, but I've got an ideological thing about trans business books that maybe one person will buy, and they'll have to lay off a bunch of people and they can't keep it running. So
yeah, it does worry me. There is a certain level that in your subsidised theatre world where the work you're going to see will have a very strong message of particularly climate change, trans, race, veganism, it could be a whole range of subjects. God, don't mention Palestine, Israel, because that can be either way now. But I don't think people are particularly caring about whether they're selling tickets or not. And so there's an arrogance that's building inside the sector, which I think is really dangerous, because we've got big financial problems. People haven't come back to theatres as much as you'd expect. They're going back to music, they're going back to sports, they're not going back to the arts, to theatre. And I think, well, why would you? Why would you pay to be lectured? You want to go. Actually, this is a really like you were saying, this is actually a really exciting time. There's some really exciting people speaking and new ideas. You know, that's why things like this are doing really well rather than going to see a theatre show.
It's interesting what you say about people not caring so much about putting bums on seats. I've been thinking recently about like politicians, for example. People say, oh, they just want the money. They're just grifting. They want money. And I think that's not ideal. But I think that is better, perhaps, than someone who's totally ideologically captured, just going on ideology. That's scary. I mean, the Jeremy Corbyns or whatever this world, or it's just, and even, you know, I don't want to pick just on that side, but on the other side as well, people who are really ideologically driven can be scary.
But if you're not worried about money, that says something about where you're coming from.
Well, yeah,
you know, like that. And I think also that's another aspect in the arts, in that I'm of an age where I was the last year that I had to go through multiple auditions. I got into a brilliant dance school, but I got my fees paid. And that was the only way I would have thought. I thought to myself, okay, I mean, I can't imagine coming out of dance school with that level of debt, because you don't earn anything as a dancer. Or it's very difficult to make a living. So the people that are going into the arts, I think, are coming from a certain class. And I'm middle class, but you know, now it's predominantly middle class. And so these beliefs, I love that phrase, luxury beliefs. They are luxury beliefs. And they're a way of kind of causing themselves angst and oppression out of thin air, basically. That's what it seems to me. Whereas I think they should be going out, working, doing stuff, and then come back to the arts when they've got something to say about it. But that's not what they're getting taught at art school or conservatoires anymore. It really is now activism, and political activism is the art. It's the one and only art. So you're losing skills like I think I've said before, like actors are coming out of very serious drama schools unable to say Shakespeare, like they haven't got the chops for it. We've got ballet being taken off the curriculum in contemporary dance schools, which is really troublesome for me, because they're decolonialising the curriculum. So in art school, where they shut the sculpture department, where in Scotland, where it was the best sculpture department in Europe, they've shut it. So young people aren't actually getting their actual hands on stuff and learning those skills. And that's also where that pedagogic relationship comes from, because you don't learn the skill from nobody. You learn it from another human being, another artist who is a human, who's got their foibles and weirdness, eccentricities. That's part of it. You're surrounded by talented artists who teach you youngster, you know, how to do something. Well, that's all being stripped away, and you're just looking at art as a vehicle for change, which isn't art.
What do you think of, say, I mentioned before, but David Tennant, for example, or the celebrities, why do they have so many trans and non-binary kids?
Oh gosh, I really don't know, and I find it, you know, quite upsetting. I went to speak to my son's headmaster, and he started off with this whole be kind. And I sort of pushed it a bit further and asked a few more questions, and it suddenly dawned on him. And he said, okay, so first of all, these children, they may not be making the decisions themselves. They may be being coerced into believing these things. And I was like, bingo, well done, that's right. Children can't make decisions like this themselves, and they're not capable of. And then he said, I also realised if I have one trans child, it's not about that one trans child. It's about every single other child that I'm responsible for, that we're destroying what they think is normal, or, you know, we're destroying reality for every other child in my school. And I was like, wow, bingo, thank you very much. And he's like, but it's not going to happen around here. And I was like, well, actually the school two miles away already does have trans children in their primary school. So I think there is this responsibility not just to that single child, but to all children. Particularly, I was less worried about my son and more worried about little girls, because I know how terrible it is using the toilet at a secondary school. You know, if we're stripping away that ability for privacy, dignity in little girls, then we create even bigger problems later on.
Do you think part of it, I mean, why are the parents coercing their kids? Is it fashion?
There's something strange going on. I think there's something more going on than just fashion. I don't think that can be explained. And it can be explained in some ways. But is there a willful blindness to what the actual consequences are? Because there can be nothing more horrifying than the thought of potentially sterilising your own children. I don't think there could be anything worse for a parent to think that they could do that. So something very odd is going on there.
It's been a wake-up call for, I think, so many of us, just thinking about, I mean, you always hear in history classes about the banality of evil.
Yeah.
You hear, how did the Nazis do it? How did the Nazis do it? I'm not trying to suggest that people, trans people, or, you know, are on that level at all, but you can see how what potentially might one day be looked back as maybe atrocities, or even right now are seen as atrocities, can be carried out in the name of righteousness.
Yeah. And I mean, my grandfather was Polish and a lawyer, and survived Nazi occupation, and met my grandmother, which is why I was born in Scotland. And then he was also a very low-level judge at the Nuremberg trials, and wanted to return back to Poland, but of course the Iron Curtain had come down. And so I was always fascinated by this era of history, because it shaped, you know, I wouldn't be here, you know, without the Holocaust, really. And on lots of levels. I mean, my grandparents weren't Jewish, but they were Polish intellectuals. So I've always been absolutely fascinated by it. And my first job was with Polish dance theatre. So I lived in Eastern Europe in the 90s. I lived in Berlin. I wrote all my dissertations about German art, you know, because I was absolutely fascinated. So I think lots of us that have that background and that history in us, like at the dinner table, arguing about whether it be the Falklands or political history. I think we were some of the first to pick up just the darkness of this movement, to say, I'm not going to just be kind if these are the consequences. Then I don't mind being the witch and burn me if it stops the harm of innocent people.
Gosh, it's like a never-ending cycle of society seeming to be okay and then being tempted towards doing something that seems really good and isn't. As I was saying before, part of your dance, what does one call a dance?
Repertoire? Like my dance work?
Your work was about taboo, all right? Didn't you told them that at the beginning, I think?
Yes.
I mean, Shakespeare was taboo, wasn't I think? And I suppose, do you get the feeling that when they saw that word taboo, they really were thinking, I get to say the things I already think, you know, which is trans stuff and climate things and those kinds of things. Do you think they think that's what taboo meant, rather than questioning those things?
Yeah, I really ask myself, like, sometimes I wonder kind of what planet I'm on compared to everybody else, when it seems obvious to me that the stuff that no one wants to talk about or look at is the stuff that really fascinates me, even if it does also terrify me. Looking at war terrified me. Looking at conspiracy theories, a bit terrifying. Looking at religion terrified me. Going, you know, into like gangs in Birmingham was really scary, actually. Some of that was more scary than doing the army exercises. So I don't think there's that many. I mean, I not naively, like, I believe in integrity. That's what an artist should be doing. And I train hard to do that, both mentally and physically. I just go back to the fact that I think other people think it's about drinking a warm white wine on premiere night and enjoying the glamour. There is a glamour to it, particularly dance. It's full of beautiful people, and it does have a glamour to it. Maybe that's the thing that attracts them. Whereas I've always loved this underbelly to dance, which is the truth, the honesty. Martha Graham's great choreographer, American choreographer, said the body never lies. And then another artist that inspires me is a painter, Otto Dix, who said you should never look away, you should never flinch. I mean, those are the two things for me that sort of really inspire me. But I guess in good times, brilliant. You know, like I get awards and nominations and all the rest of it. In difficult times, you become the target. You're dangerous by asking these questions. And I even worked with some ex-Secret Service people to ask them why that was. And they said, well, we look at it in unstable regimes. First of all, we see if the activists are getting kind of hounded and put in prison and tortured and things like that. But then the second thing we look at is artists. And they said, that's just a really good temperature gauge of what's going on with the regime. And if we start to see artists getting like blacklisted, smeared, all the rest of it, we know the authoritarianism is coming in. And he said, we're used to looking at that in unstable regimes. We're just not used to seeing it in the West.
Wow. So that's quite scary, really. I was thinking about other times where art in the West has been sort of censored. A Clockwork Orange, I think, was.
Yeah.
Lolita, I think, but not very often. Now they're changing the words of Roald Dahl. I mean, that's really scary. I think that's scarier than we've even realised how scary that is. They've gone back and changed the words in books from dead authors. How did you even go 17 years without getting into trouble?
That's a good question. So I suppose that's when I did get into trouble. I was kind of like, you might have been courting some of this.
Yeah.
I mean, what's amazing about dance is you're not saying it. You're not saying it. You're playing not just with the body and with like relationships between bodies. You're playing with emotions. So both the emotions of the performers, but also eliciting emotions in the audience. And you're also playing with symbols. So you can say sort of love, hate, pain, beauty, all literally within 4 movements. So I think that's how I sort of got away with it. And I was wanting to get away with it with Orlando. I wanted to play with it visually, physically, make us all come away going, God, what was Virginia Woolf trying to tell us? She was telling us something that sometimes we are our bodies and sometimes we're outside our bodies, and all of that is absolutely fine. And the only way we can really experience ourselves and our bodies is by action and doing and being. And the more we separate ourselves, which this trans ideology is absolutely separating the mind and the body in such an extraordinary way, it's way beyond Descartes' sort of the mind-body separation. Actually we do have a tension between who we are and who we think we are. And actually we can only solve that problem by doing. And dance really gives me that sense of being wholly, totally in the world. And sometimes when I'm watching really good dance, I also feel it as an audience member. And I try and do that in my work.
Virginia Woolf's obviously an interesting character or figure. Did she actually just walk into the water? Because that's how it looks in The Hours. You know that movie? She just sort of walks in like Ophelia. Is that how she died? Because that's just impossible to even imagine.
So I struggled with Virginia Woolf when I was younger. I found it really wordy.
I find it really, really hard. I can't read Virginia Woolf.
But Orlando was the first book where I got an actual physical rush because she goes from Elizabethan England right through to sort of like modernism. And so the final chapter is like a stream of consciousness, which is more kind of how some of other Virginia Woolf's novels. But by then I've gone on all this journey of 400 years and it was like exhilarating. It was like boom, aeroplanes and steam trains and love and sex, and it's amazing. So after finishing Orlando, I read all her letters with Vita Sackville West. I can say that right. And I sobbed my eyes out at the end because I think reading between the lines is my own interpretation of it. Virginia Woolf suffered from quite serious depression and would have periods where she couldn't leave the house or she couldn't leave the sofa. And she said, I'm going through one of my sort of little phases or something. And so by the time when you get to the point where I think she put rocks in her pockets and went into the river. Yeah.
The reason I go, and that really stayed in my mind because I just think, but you'd surely get to a point where she must have really wanted to end her life. It's very sad.
But I think there's an unbearableness to her experience of life that comes across in her books. Like she's so alive. She writes really eloquently about the kind of the awareness of awareness kind of thing, like the being aware of every moment and knowing that it's fleeting and passing, the kind of the daily tragedies of being present. Most of us kind of, that's why we've got these little phones, we can distract ourselves all the time. But actually truly being alive is heartbreaking sometimes. She's so acutely sensitive that I think it almost was too much for her. I mean, when you read her books, it's almost too much.
Yeah, I struggled with her, but it was like Mrs. Dalloway, and I couldn't.
To the Lighthouse, yeah.
Yeah, the hours was good though. I mean, because it's movies, it's easier to watch, obviously, popcorn and stuff. So that was easier.
I couldn't get over the prosthetic nose, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what my wife said as well.
Really?
Yeah, she made me take it off. So I don't even know what that joke means. But anyway, you set up Freedom in the Arts. With Denise Farmy, who had a similar issue with Arts Council England.
Yes, so it was a bit like joining the secret resistance, because I you're so careful like who you talk to, and then I talked to one person, and then they talked to another person, and then there was this whole network of women in the arts. Like, wow. So that's how I met Denise, first of all, and she helped me when I was going through my crisis. But Denise was already on it. She'd had put together about 15 case studies, and then when my came along as well, that was kind of like the headline. She took it to Darren Henley, the chief executive of the Arts Council, and she said, there is a really serious problem going on, and it is really seriously affecting women, particularly women over the age of 35, probably. And it's devastating the arts sector. And as far as, her opinion was, it's harassment and bullying. Anyway, it was sort of just waved away. And then later on, I won't say Denise's story for her, but she defended a very small grant, £10,000 grant to LGB Alliance through a devolved funder, that then ended up with a massive 400 online Zoom full Arts Council staff meeting led by the Deputy Executive, Simon Mellor, who said some very discriminatory statements. In the actual fact, he said some nasty stuff about me as well. And Denise just pushed back very slightly on the sort of online chat, which led to a sort of harassment campaign by staff members and a petition against her. And she's going to talk about it probably later today. The wording used was unbelievable, and the Arts Council didn't pull it down. Anyway, she took them to a tribunal, and she won discrimination and harassment against them. Yeah.
Good on her. Have you got like close friends who turned against you as well?
Gosh, yeah. I'd say like family's the one where you're really careful. Because I think we might have different opinions, or even they might agree with me, but I don't want to fall out with them, and I think life's too short. I think I didn't realise what a workaholic I was, that everything was sort of related to work. And so if people don't want to work with me and don't want to be friends with me, then okay, fair enough. I mean, I am sad about it. And I'm also been like really amazed and heartened by the people who don't give a shit and still love me and still want to work with me, and I guess either get it or even maybe disagree with me, but still want to work with me. So
what is the fundamental, I know we've touched on this, but the fundamental issue with the ideology around gender? Okay,
so fundamentally we are either male or female, and that's down to a cellular level. And there are things called disorders of sexual development, but you will still have X or XY chromosomes, and there has been nobody born with both large gametes, small gametes. So, sorry to go into the biology of it, but it's like there's never been born a person who's both male and female. So, I'm still liberal in the sense that any man can have feminine behaviour, any woman can have masculine behaviour. I don't care. I really don't care about that. But to deny that we have physical bodies is just so deeply wrong, and has thus multiple implications further on. And then I'm a dancer. I live in changing rooms, and I have had the experiences of having men who say they're women in female spaces, and it's really upsetting. And I have been a victim of domestic violence, and I don't want to be around men that I don't know unintentionally when I'm vulnerable. I don't. It really does affect me.
What about, you've said you don't mind men being feminine and vice versa, men wearing dresses and things like that. How do you feel about that?
See, I used to totally be okay, wear what you want, dress who you please, love who will ever have you, as JK Rowling would say. I think now, though, that's not what's happening. I think it is about a dominance and a challenge. So I have seen men in dresses who are it's like they're looking for an argument with it. So I'm now just wary. I feel really sad that it's made me feel like that, but it has. It's made me feel like wary and suspicious.
But at the same time, individual liberty, does it dictate that? Well, that should. But I only ask because there's been a bit of a civil war almost among the gender realists, I think, where some are saying, someone turned up at GenSpect wearing a dress, and this is terrible that they let that go on, and other people saying, look, we're not about stopping people doing what they want. Like, do what you want. You just can't make us change our own rules and laws and policies based on utter nonsense.
But I suppose if I don't really want to get into that argument, I suppose, because I can see both sides of it, actually, to be honest. But I also kind of want to defend women who just say, no, don't like it. It's offensive. I think that's fair enough. And they're not mad and they're not active. They're not the same as trans activists for saying that. They're holding a line. And if you want to be more liberal, be more liberal. I can see both sides.
Yeah, that's a complicated one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Some people view it as woman face, like blackface might be.
Yeah.
That being offensive.
Yeah.
Oh gosh,
yeah,
it's difficult.
And it's crazy because, and it's used both ways because, people say, well, what about pantomime? Or, I've even used it in my own work. There's a great history in the arts of messing about with sex and gender and stereotypes and playing with that, and that's a place for it. I've once had to play a male in a where I had like a big beard and massive eyebrows, and I was wearing a kilt, and it was in a big opera house, and I was like, dancing like this, and then just at the end when we took our bows, I was allowed to whip my beard off, and one of my friends was like, "Oh my God, I fancied you. I thought you were." Something kind of really attractive about like messing around with it all. So, but I would say that in my old days, the theatre, the stage is the place to do it. I think one of my sort of more problems in the arts is that if you're already playing a role, if you're already acting in your day-to-day life, what the hell are you bringing to the workplace? Do we have to strip all that away and start again? Or is that now offensive? Like, surely you want to live your life as fully and authentically as possible, and then you come onto the stage and then you play with it all. I just think it's all the wrong way around. And that's partly through the sort of Instagram generation, this kind of online performative sense of self, but it's deep now. People are performing themselves, almost like as if they were a brand, and that's not good for the arts. That's a real lack of authenticity. It's
a really fine line you have to tread, because I guess you don't really want to have a stage where people are just, Sieg Heiling and those are the good guys, and that's the message of the show. And then there are things like blackface. We've decided as a society that's wrong, but maybe somebody wants to experiment with acting as though they're a different race, as one might as a different sex or gender. I know that's really controversial to say now, but so there are already these kinds of restrictions that we don't even think about that are placed on artists.
Yeah, and that's why Andrew Doyle's right in that it's a kind of it's like the new Puritans. There's a new puritanical sort of like, and I was talking to someone recently this week, a theatre person, sort of saying, are we going to actually in the arts ask for a Lord Chamberlain back, because that's where it's going? We're going to ask it. Can it go away, and can it be looked at and approved by someone, so we in the theatre don't have to take a risk with this new play, this new production? So you're actually voluntarily asking for censorship.
Yeah, we've already gone that way, haven't we?
Yeah.
Beyond.
Yeah.
Wow. I was thinking about this the other day. It was only 13 years ago. Did you ever see that Stacey Dooley documentary on the BBC about Islam taking over Luton?
Oh, right, no.
She did. So it seems insane, because Stacey Dooley, and for anyone who doesn't know Stacey Dooley and like non-Brits watching, she's like this happy, nice face on dancing shows and things like that. But she was also a hardened journalist, and she's a good journalist. And 13 years ago, she did this My Hometown. And the idea of the documentary was like, there was extreme Islam taking over Luton. They've gone from one mosque to about 40 in just her short life at that point. She was like 20 something. And nowadays you could never in a million years have that as a documentary. And I just thought, isn't that amazing? Just in 13 years, that would be shocking. She would never speak about that. That's how far sensibilities have changed, and we have to get everything checked. And that means that we're not reporting what's actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the repercussions is that everything that you're going to see on the stages is going to be pre-approved, safe work. It's not going to be the most exciting, and that's a tragedy, because these times deserve some good art. And I don't have this romanticized view that oppression can be really good for the arts, because if you look at how many millions were killed by the Soviets, just because Shostakovich made some good music, it doesn't justify the murder of probably tens of hundreds, if not thousands, of artists. So I'm not like, oh yeah, it's great to live under these difficult political times. I think it's difficult, it's dangerous, it's hard to make a livelihood.
What did you think of that? At first, it doesn't seem like a trans issue, but I think it is. The Imane Khelif situation with the Olympics. That was I'm led to believe, a male boxer who was competing with women, beating the hell out of them, and the BBC is just all behind them and supporting it.
Yeah, I found it sort of like on a physical level very upsetting. I know what it's like to be hit by a man. It's different than being hit by a woman. Men are much, much stronger, and these are strong women, and you could see that they were like, punch drunk from it. I think what was really interesting afterwards was how opaque the media made the whole story. So if you didn't know about the complexities of this issue, you could draw conclusions that everyone was being a bigot.
Yeah.
And that it went, there was like a window where it opened, and it seemed like there was going to be an actual honest reporting of it. And in fact, was it Oliver Brown, The Telegraph was about one of the only guys that, sports journalists that really held the line. So the window opened. I thought it was going to pique lots of people, but then that window closed, and then it became this other thing. And then there was this kind of like, following that opaqueness, this boxer came out like did you see, like with full makeup on? And
oh yeah,
it was very odd. Found it really quite chilling.
After he'd been lofted on the shoulders of his his trainer, yeah, which wouldn't necessarily. I don't think it could never happen, because people are saying that would never happen in Algeria.
I'm not sure.
Algerian Islam is not necessarily as extreme as Islam in other countries. It could happen. It seems unlikely that should be on his shoulders like that. This is, I think, which shows us not only that Imane is a man, but I think that Imane knows that Imane is a man.
Yeah, and I think there's some people much more qualified than me that can talk about sports, but it does seem to be athletes that are in third world countries where sports are very, very lucrative way out of poverty, that these are complex DSDs, but the disorder sex DSD that this person had can only be had by males. So there's these sort of simple parts to it that it does take a little bit of complexity, but if you know enough, then you can kind of make your own conclusions.
I had this debate, because you're absolutely right that it's so strange that most people didn't even hear that this person might be actually a man, or they heard and it was so impossible for them to, and it's just bigots, as you say. And I had this debate at a dinner at a festival recently. It was a woman, I think in her 60s, who was a philosophy teacher at the Sorbonne, a French woman. And I thought, oh, I'm really interested. I want to hear the other side of this, because she was on the other side. I thought, what interesting arguments do they have? So I said, listen, I've spoken to Dr. Emma Hilton, who's a developmental biologist at the University of Manchester. I've spoken to Colin Wright, who's a friend of mine, who's an evolutionary scientist, something like that. He's one of the things, and they explained each of them for hours. They gave me hours of time explaining this is absolutely a man. There's no other thing. It's just, that's a man. So I explained that to this philosopher, and she was saying, no, you don't understand. She was very French. This whole story is an excuse for me to bring out the accents. So and there was a German next to her. No, there wasn't. And so she said, no, you don't understand, because I'm French. I know about this because the Olympics was in France. And I said, okay, well, tell me. She goes, no, I understand because I'm French. And honestly, that was her argument. That was it. And I said, so I said, well, hang on. You being French is not an argument that Imane Khelif. I mean, it's very nice that you're French, and a lot of people are, and it's good, but that doesn't prove anything about Imane Khelif. And then someone just overheard that bit and said, oh, don't have a go at her for being French. I was like, no, I'm not having a go at her for being being French. Doesn't matter. And again, I was the bigot then going, no, it's fine that you're French. And then that was the whole issue then. And I was like, I've been xenophobic against the French. But that was it. There wasn't. And I think all of us, I think many of us who are here today, many of us who watched this show as well, we're just sitting there waiting for the other argument. We're waiting for Peter Tatchell to say anything other than, no, that doesn't happen. Because that's all he says, that doesn't happen. And it does. And we show him and he goes, well, it shouldn't have happened. And you go, yeah, where's the other argument? I've got one more question for you, but first, where can people follow you, get your work, see what's what?
So I run two companies. I run the dance company, which is k2co.com, and we're filming a lovely adaptation of Five Soldiers this January, but we're also touring sort of summertime next year, so please come along. I shall be dancing. Yikes. As well as another piece called Fantasia, which is really, really beautiful. It's all about beauty and music, because I knew this was coming. I made this piece in 2019 trying to stay out of trouble.
Was that what that Disney one was called? Is that
Well, Fantasia is just a musical term that means a composer's flight of imagination. And so I wanted to do a sort of choreographic flight of imagination that's just beautiful. But there is a sort of, in dance, we call it Mickey Mousing. If you're dancing to the music too much, we call it Mickey Mousing. And so there was a bit of me that wanted to do, like, play with contemporary dance's snobism about dancing to music, because I like dancing to music.
That sounds fun, all this plotting and scheming.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then Freedom in the Arts is www.freedominthearts.com. Please like and follow and all the rest of it. We're on Twitter. And we will be putting out a survey next week to ask for anyone who's involved in the arts, that works in the arts, that is an artist, to give us feedback on a culture of freedom or censorship in the arts. We're comparing a 2019 arts professional survey with today to see if anything's changed in the past 5 years. Might have changed a little bit.
They might just...
Might not. We might be wrong. We might be bigots.
Who is bigot Rosie? Who is a heretic you admire? And don't say Virginia Woolf, because we've done her.
Oh, a heretic that I admire.
Yeah, we're supposed to tell you before to think of.
I know. I could have had time to think about it.
If you had any familiarity with the show, you'd know that.
I mean, the woman that comes to mind, because she came to me when we were talking earlier about when I felt like my brain broke. On the way to the psychiatrist, I'd bought her book, but I hadn't read it yet. But on the way driving to the psychiatrist, I listened to her podcast with Helen Joyce, and just her matter-of-fact, lovely Irish accented way of talking about the issues. Literally, I knew I wasn't mad by the time I got to the psychiatrist. So I'd like to say, she had a very important and healthy healing impact on me. She doesn't know this, by the way.
Well, we'll make sure to tell her, because she's in the building probably today. Yeah. Isn't it funny, all those years in the arts, you needed a mathematician to bring you to sense.
Yes.
So there you go. People, please do go and follow Rosie, and we'll put all those links below, and she's absolutely brilliant, so please do that. Hit the like button, and there'll be a thing above my head, not that the audience can see now, but you will be able to later, to keep watching this show.